Every modern organization relies on an interconnected digital nervous system to generate revenue, deliver services, and keep operations running. If that network is breached, the entire operation halts. Securing these systems is a baseline requirement, but information assurance operates on a harsh reality. It is impossible to eliminate all security risks. Cyber threats evolve constantly, presenting an infinite landscape of potential attacks. Against this infinite landscape, an organization only has finite resources, a limited budget, a set number of personnel, and finite computing power. Because resources are limited, attempting to secure every single asset equally is a guaranteed path to failure. It spreads defensive measures too thin, leading to widespread inefficiency and leaving critical systems exposed. To solve this imbalance, organizations rely on risk management. This is the systematic process used to identify exactly where a network is most vulnerable and prioritize where security investments should go. By transforming abstract fears of a cyber attack into a structured evaluation model, organizations can allocate their defenses effectively, ensuring business continuity and strategic resilience. To build this model, we have to define its variables. The first is an asset, any resource that holds value to the organization's mission and requires protection from unauthorized actions. Historically, this meant physical hardware. Servers, desktop computers, and magnetic tape reels formed the tangible footprint of early processing systems and data storage. Today, that definition expands far beyond hardware. Assets include software like database systems, network infrastructure like firewalls and routers, and the personnel who operate them. Human assets occupy a unique position in this framework. Employees and administrators are highly valuable resources for keeping systems running, but they are simultaneously significant sources of internal security risk. Since protective resources are finite, an organization has to classify these assets strictly by their value and sensitivity. Information intended for general release sits at the public baseline, while data scales upward through internal and confidential tiers, peaking at highly confidential for things like trade secrets and classified research. Formally inventorying and classifying these assets is the mandatory prerequisite step. An organization cannot evaluate potential dangers until it knows exactly what it needs to protect. The second variable in the model is a threat. This is any potential source, circumstance, or actor capable of causing an unwanted incident that compromises an asset. Threats often originate from humans. These can be intentional actions, like a nation-state hacker deploying malware, or unintentional actions, like an employee accidentally deleting a critical customer database. But the threat landscape isn't entirely digital or human. Physical, environmental forces, such as floods and earthquakes, can physically destroy infrastructure and completely disrupt system availability. The third and final variable is a vulnerability. This is a specific flaw or weakness in a technology, a business process, or human behavior. Organizations exhibit vulnerabilities in multiple ways. Software might be missing a critical security patch, a server room might be left unlocked, or an organization might suffer from poor access management protocols. It is a definitive rule of information assurance that a vulnerability on its own does not result in a security incident. A breach only occurs when an active threat successfully exploits that specific weakness. When these three variables interact, they produce a quantifiable consequence. If we combine them into an equation, an asset exposed to a threat through a vulnerability, the result is risk. We can apply this formula to a practical scenario.
Consider a university where the primary asset is a student information system holding thousands of academic records. The vulnerability is a weak administrator password on that system. The threat is a cyber criminal actively deploying ransomware. The process of finding these variables in a real organization is called the risk assessment process. The first three steps of this framework map exactly to identifying your assets, recognizing potential threats, and discovering existing vulnerabilities. Once the variables are identified, the process moves to steps 4 and 5, risk analysis and risk evaluation. Evaluation requires measuring two specific dimensions. Security teams calculate the statistical likelihood of an attack occurring and weigh it against the potential financial or operational impact if that attack succeeds. Measuring likelihood and impact strips the emotion out of cybersecurity. It allows organizations to transition from subjective fear into objective, prioritized data analysis. This chart is a risk matrix, the primary visualization tool used by executives to prioritize evaluated risks based on likelihood and impact. If a vulnerability is both highly likely to be exploited and carries a massive operational impact, it plots directly into the top right corner. This demands immediate resource allocation. Once a risk is evaluated and prioritized on the matrix, the organization must act. They select one of 4 standard risk treatment strategies. The first strategy is risk avoidance. This means eliminating the source of the risk entirely, like taking a highly vulnerable legacy server completely offline. The second is risk mitigation. This is the most common approach, involving the installation of specific controls, like firewalls or multi-factor authentication, to reduce the likelihood or impact of an attack. The third strategy is risk transfer. Here, the organization shifts the financial or operational consequences to a third party. This is usually done by purchasing cyber insurance or outsourcing to managed security service providers. The final strategy is risk acceptance. Sometimes the cost of implementing a security control outweighs the potential loss of a breach. In these cases, management formally approves leaving a low-impact risk untreated. The risk assessment process generates the objective data management requires to execute these treatment strategies with precision. This circular diagram shows how risk management operates as a continuous life cycle. Because technology and cybercriminals constantly evolve, assessing risk cannot be a one-time audit. It requires constant monitoring and review. Applying this ongoing life cycle is critical in high-stakes environments, especially where international operations and human lives are on the line. Aviation is a prime example of critical infrastructure requiring rigorous information assurance. Operational safety and service continuity depend directly on their system integrity. Evaluating cyber risks in airport operational networks and airline reservation systems is how the industry prevents cascading service disruptions and grounded flights. Risk mitigation in aviation extends to the physical world, requiring complex redundancy and immediate disaster recovery plans for critical flight support systems. To maintain this posture, organizations rely on continuous monitoring through system logging and threat intelligence, allowing them to detect anomalies in real time. Sustaining this cycle requires clear internal security policies and continuous cybersecurity training for employees actively operating the systems. By integrating this structured risk management framework into daily operations, organizations transform a chaotic landscape of vulnerabilities into manageable data. They ensure their critical assets remain secure against an unpredictable future.